This is lesson 713, the Renaissance Art. Place is still Italy. The time frame is still the 1400s to the 1600s. And our history quote is from E.M. Forster. History develops, art stands still. What does that mean? Well, art is always going to be a reflection of what's going on in history. And like anything that reflects, like a mirror, the mirror doesn't change. The images in the mirror changes, but the images are simply a reflection of what's going on around that mirror. And art's the same way. Art isn't really doing the changing, it's simply mirroring the changes that are going on in society. Let's talk about the concept of patronage. Patronage refers to the customer, the person that supports the artist by buying the art. Before the Renaissance, the largest patron of art was the Catholic Church. And it was a good patron. It kept a lot of artists employed. But the church wanted things a certain way. They wanted certain subjects. They wanted a certain style. And this kind of inhibited individualism among the artists. Not to blame the Catholic Church. They're the customer. They're the ones paying. They should get it their way. But after the Renaissance, more lay people who were not the church, people who were not clergy, were paying for art also. People like princes and merchants and even middle-class people. And they don't tend to tell the artist how to paint, and sometimes they don't even tell the artist what to paint. It's kind of like surprise me. The artist was now free to show and develop his own unique individual style. After the Renaissance, there was more wealth in Italy among the people. The Black Plague had created wealthy people who had inherited money from those who had died. And wealthy people tend to buy a lot of art. Art was considered a good investment for your money. You weren't going to get rich, but art was a lot safer than some of the harebrained business schemes out there. There were also changes in religion. The church had gone through a lot of problems, as we've seen, problems like the Great Papal Schism, the Black Death, famines, the 100 Years' War, and the church had lost a lot of credibility because of its inability to fix these problems. I mean, how do you fix the Black Death? The church couldn't. They couldn't do anything. And that undermined the respect that it had. Many people were turning to art for their religious experience apart from the church. Secularism, which we talked about in the last lesson, was also changing art. Art no longer had to be about just religious subjects. You could have art about classical subjects. You could have art about daily life. Humanism was also changing art. Remember in the last lesson that eloquence and precision of expression was one of the hallmarks, one of the pillars of this new humanism. And these things ensured that people you were talking to were seeing the same thing in their minds through the use of good description and good words. But what about what the eye sees? Hence, linear perspective, making closer things look bigger and farther away things look smaller. But that's not easy. You know how the words in every Star Wars movie seem to move away from you until they're too far away to read? Of course, they're not really moving away, are they? It's a flat screen. How could they be? Well, that's a technique called linear perspective. And Renaissance artists worked hard to master it, as you can see on this painting to the right. Hence also correct anatomy. Artists became very interested in studying bone structure and muscle structure to make their work more accurate and precise. Some artists even studied dead bodies to get the anatomy right. And if we're both talking about the same person, wouldn't it be helpful to know what the person looks like? Hence, portraiture. Portraiture of people with individual features and emotional expressions. You look at this person and kind of wonder what she's thinking. She looks kind of mad, kind of annoyed. What's making her feel that way? Not only that, but you also feel like if you saw her walking down the street, you'd recognize her. So Renaissance artists were trying to do the same thing with pictures and visual forms as Renaissance writers and scholars were trying to do with words. Keep in mind what we're saying here is humanism in action. It's an emphasis on what we've been talking about, the human body, human emotion, human expression, human individuality. And we're also seeing secularism at work here. These people in these portraits, they're not saints, they're not angels, they're just regular people. Giotto did this painting about 1325, very early. It's actually before the Renaissance, but you can see where painting is going. And this painting is called The Death of St. Francis. And the whole painting is trying to get you to look down and to the left at St. Francis' face. He's a real person. And the painting is also meant to get you involved in all of the emotion. You can see all of the emotional reactions that all of his friends are having to his death. This is Brunelleschi's church in San Lorenzo. And Brunelleschi is using lines, just like Giotto was, to get you to look at something, to get you to look at that altar. Brunelleschi's dome in the Duomo Cathedral in Florence. Brunelleschi had to relearn how to design a dome by studying ancient ruins. No one had designed and built a dome since Roman times. This is Masaccio, 1427, his painting The Resurrection of the Son of Theophilus. And he's putting depth and perspective into the painting. In fact, if you look hard, he's actually using the building with the doorway in it to create a sense of depth. Here's Masaccio himself in his own painting. This painting is by Fra Filippo Lippi, and it's called The Madonna and Child. He worked on it from 1440 to 1445, and what's amazing about this is he's painting Mary as a real person with real emotions. That never happened in medieval art. This is The Death of Adam. This was made around 1452 by Piero della Francesca. And notice the depth perspective given to us in the background of the painting with the angel and the other person talking in the background. This is a doorway by Lorenzo Giberti. He lived from 1378 to 1455, and this doorway was called the Gates of Paradise. And Giberti actually won a contest to construct the doors of the baptistry in the city of Florence. And this was the winning door. It had 10 panels depicting biblical scenes. And up close, these 10 panels look amazingly real. Donatello, who lived from 1386 to 1466, was an outstanding early Renaissance sculptor. He actually traveled with Brunelleschi to Rome, where he studied Roman sculpture. Back in Florence, he revived classical Roman sculpture with all of its realism and all of its admiration for the human body. This statue is his bronze David, and it was the first Renaissance nude and was considered quite shocking at the time. Leonardo da Vinci, who lived from 1452 to 1519, was a painter, architect, engineer, and sculptor. Only 15 of his paintings survive, and all 15 of them are considered among the greatest masterpieces of all time. And his greatest talent was in portraying human psychology and human emotion in his subjects. In his Last Supper in Milan, he shows the reactions of all the individual disciples at the moment that Jesus reveals that he will be betrayed. And so they all have different emotional, individual reactions. One is going, no way, and the other one's like, not me, and they're like, who could it be? They all have individual reactions in this moment. And then you have Michelangelo, who lived from 1475 to 1564, and he was a genius at painting, architecture, and sculpture. Almost everybody's familiar with Michelangelo's statue of David that stands in Florence. But not many people know this. Michelangelo portrayed his subjects in moments of psychological transition when their faces most clearly revealed the inner self. And in this statue, Michelangelo is giving us David's face at the very instant that David is deciding that he's going to go for it and take on Goliath.